Today we will be going over how to create a ring for your finger using SOLIDWORKS and to print that on the SLA Formlabs Form 3 printer. So we're going to use SOLIDWORKS today to create the ring. Notice that I am in millimeters. To start our ring, I'm going to use the top plane. And in the top plane, I'm going to draw two circles. And I'm going to dimension the inner circle to whatever size diameter my finger is, or the finger that I'm going to put the ring on. Now, during class, you will have a ring sizing gauge to check your actual finger. So you'll be able to get an exact amount of distance here for the inside of the ring. So this 21 is going to vary. It is not going to be 21. You're going to measure your own finger, and that number will probably be different than mine. Okay. The outside diameter, I'm not going to use an outside diameter. I'm going to click on both circles so that I can get a dimension like this, which is going to basically tell us how thick the ring will be. And so I have this set to 5 millimeters. I think that's probably a little thick. I'm going to change that to 3.5. So you have to think about during this project, how big, how thick. The dimensioning is really important for this ring, because you want to think about how it's going to feel on your finger in addition to what it looks like. So dimensioning and using calipers and rulers to measure is extremely important. So once those two dimensions have been set, we can now extrude the circles, excuse me. And again, you have to think about, okay, how thick do I want this to be? I'm going to make this about 8 millimeters and click OK. Now you can always go back and you can adjust the dimensions of your sketch and of the extrusion right here anytime you want before you print it. Now, to customize this, there's a couple things. First of all, we have 90-degree corners right here. They're sharper edges. Okay? If you're not familiar with rings and putting them on and off your finger, you don't want sharp edges. One, they can dig into your skin, and two, it can help the ring come on and off easier. And so I'm going to add a fillet to the corner. Now yours might default to 10 millimeters, so you may need to change the radius of the fillet, but I'm going to put a 1 millimeter fillet on each edge so that my ring starts to look like this. Okay. Now you may also want to customize what's on this surface all the way around. And so I'm going to take you through a new concept called a wrap. It is on the features toolbar, wrap, right here. But first what we're going to do is we're going to create a new plane that is, so right now, here's our origin. So our planes, our default planes, they run right through the middle or very close to our object. Okay, so what we want is we want a plane that is out here. And so I'm going to use my front plane. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go to Reference Geometry, Plane. And it gives me a preview. So basically I'm creating a new plane, a specific distance, it defaults to 10 millimeters, away from the original front plane here. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to make it about 30, as long as it's outside of the ring. I'm going to click OK. So there's our new plane, plane 1. Notice it shows up in our design tree. If you don't want to look at it or see it, you can always turn it off with the hide feature right here. Or if you want to see it, you can turn it back on. So on that plane, I'm going to start a sketch. And I'm going to look at it normal too, because I do want to make sure that my, whatever I'm going to emboss onto or cut into here in my ring, I'm looking at it straight and I make sure it's going to fit directly on the ring. So there are a couple options here. You could design a pattern to put on the ring, or you could design text, and we're going to go over both today. So first of all, let's say maybe you want to do a pattern. And so I'm going to use my polygon tool, and I'm going to draw a polygon, a hexagon, and in good practice, I'm going to add some relations and dimensions to this so that it's fully defined. And one last relation, I'm going to assign a vertical relationship between the center point of that inscribed circle and the origin. And so now that is fully defined. I'm going to make this a hair bigger. There we go. Good. Good, good, good. And I'm going to exit the sketch. So as we see this, our sketch is on that plane. It is not touching our object, but we are going to what's called wrap this onto our object. And so I'm going to go to Features, Wrap, and I need to choose a sketch. So it's asking here a plane or a sketch. So I'm going to choose our sketch. And so it highlights here in wrap parameters. Now this blue box right here, this is the face for wrap sketch. This is what you want to project this onto. And so that would be this surface here. And so notice it projects that onto that object. It's going to cut in 1 millimeter. Now you can adjust that. I'm going to leave it at 1, and I'm going to click OK. So now I have that shape engraved, cut into our ring. Now maybe I want that to be a pattern all the way around. Okay, so this is another new feature that we're going to talk about, and that is circular pattern. So on the Features toolbar, under Linear Pattern, the flyout menu, Circular Pattern. So the first thing it's asking right here is the features and face. So what do we want to pattern? So there's two ways that we can select that. We could open up our design tree in the display area and choose the wrap, or we can click on the surface in there. Okay, notice it says wrap right here. And then lastly, right here at the very top under direction 1, it's asking for the pattern axis. We can actually just click on this surface and it will pattern that around. So this is set to 16. Yours might default to 4 or 6. And so you can see how this will work. I'm going to leave it at 12 and click OK. I'm going to hide my plane. I don't need to see it. So here is a pattern of a ring. Okay. Now let's say maybe you wanted to put some text on here instead of a symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete. Actually, what I'll do is I'll roll this back to my wrap. So in my wrap, I could use, instead of this shape, I can delete that and I can use my text tool. So on my sketch toolbar, you notice there is a text icon. Before you do that, what I always suggest is using a center line. And I'm going to do a midpoint line. I'm going to click right here and I'm going to stretch this across. And you can think of the text will be on this line. So you could think of this as a line on a piece of paper. And so you're writing a word and you're staying on the line. It does need to be a center line. If it is a object line, your cut into the material will not work. So this does need to be a center line. So now I can go to my text tool and it's asking for the curve. And the curve in this case is the center line. The text, you type that here. Now you can center it, so it's now centered on the line. You can bold it. I think you do have to have that highlighted. There's bold. You can flip it. You can do a lot of things here. Now, if you want a different font, you can choose close or use font. You can uncheck the use document font button and then click on font, and you can pick a different font. One thing you need to be careful of is if, let's say, that would work. Fonts that are very stylish and creative, fancy, if you will, like let's say Chiller. This may not cut because of, well, that one might because it does have closed contours. Let me find another one. I want to give you a good example of something not to choose. Blocky text works the best. Yes, even Comic Sans works nicely. Okay, here's a good example. Notice how this is very stylish and creative, but notice right here the font intersects itself right there. So if you were try to wrap or cut with this font, it will not work because it's intersecting itself. It's not an open contour. Notice right here as well. Okay, it forms a loop. That's bad. That's not going to cut. Okay, so you want to use more of a block type of font. This would work just fine. Okay. And once you have that set up, you can hit OK and exit the sketch. Now, since I already did the wrap, you can see that it has been embossed in there. Now, if I were to roll this down and activate the circular pattern, it may or may not work. It's probably, oh, it did work. What do you know? But that's pretty crazy. So let's go back in and check it. Yeah, I don't think we want 12 of those. Maybe we want, there, let's say 5. So now you have yourself there a CCIC ring. Okay. The ring, when it's done, will be gray, much like what you see here. You can paint it, but the color choice is gray coming out of the printer. But this would be then ready to, you would save this as an STL file, and you would then import this into Preform.